I'm Laura Greenfield, and I'm here at Oakland Farm Trees, which is a native tree and shrub nursery that I run with my family here on our family farm in Paris, Kentucky. My uncle had the idea for the tree nursery 10 years ago, and it was around the same time I started getting interested in farming and finding my place on the family farm. I grew up coming out here, and it always felt so good to be out in the country with the big sky and around the animals and with all the big trees. But my uncle had the idea that and observed on the farm that we needed a lot more shade for cattle. And then just for conservation purposes, continuing to add trees and shrubs around the waterways on the farm. Kennedy Creek runs through the farm, which runs into Stoner Creek, which is where Paris gets our water. And so we thought maybe we could just start growing trees ourselves. And so we started 10 years ago growing the big canopy trees, the oaks, sycamore, tulip poplar. And over the last decade, I've just been learning more about our native flora. And so now we've expanded to be growing upper canopy, mid canopy, and lower canopy, getting into the shrubs. There's just so many different native species that all have a really big part of our ecosystem, supporting wildlife, supporting pollinators, of course supporting the cattle operation, the beef operation out here, and shade, enhancing water quality, all of that. Yeah, behind me are actually some of my favorites, so we picked a good spot to be in. Up close here are spice bush, which is one of our native flowering shrubs. Often you find spice bush naturally in the woods as a lower mid-canopy plant. Spice bush has a really important part of our ecosystem, being one of the two plants that the spice bush swallowtail butterfly can lay her eggs on. Their relationships, symbiotic relationships that have been formed over all of evolution between native plants and pollinators, so our butterflies, our bees, our moths, even flies and beetles. 90% of the world's insects are actually specialists, which means they can only host or feed or reproduce on certain native plants. And so there's that same story for every one of these plants out here, how they exactly fit in. As a mid-canopy plant, they also offer just protection, for the forest floor, some really good coverage for wildlife, and then berries too, which is a favorite of our bird species here. Behind them are two other native flowering shrubs, black haw viburnum and arrowwood viburnum, beautiful flowers, look beautiful in a landscape or in a more wild setting, around a conservation zone or a pond that you might have on the farm or your house. And then redbud, which is a beautiful flowering tree. I'm looking across the nursery at some sycamores and tulip poplar that we have growing too. And so a lot of the times when I'm talking to customers, we're looking at their landscape, which is often a farm as well, and we're thinking about how can we be building up the different layers of canopy so that they work together. What you see out in the fields here, especially in the bluegrass region, are big old trees that are standing, kind of alone in the landscape. 300, 400-year-old bur oaks, chinkapin oaks, shellbark hickory. And so that's the setting they're in and can thrive in. But otherwise, we want to be thinking about what's the edge habitat for deer and turkey and quail. What's the habitat, the different layers that are filtering water as it goes into whether it's a pond or a creek on your farm. A lot of our customers, like us, are seeing loss of canopy on the farm, not just from us, humans taking down, trees across, generations, which has been done, on probably everybody's farm, but also just from decreasing canopy because just of wind, storm damage, introduced insects and diseases coming in. And so majority of our customers are really conscious of that and are really sad to see the loss of these hundreds of year-old trees that are really hard to replace. And so there's an old saying, I think it's a Chinese proverb, that the best time to plant a tree was 20 years ago and the second best time is today. And so me and customers talk about that a lot, and we can feel sad looking at the loss of canopy, not just on our farmland, but also forests, that there's that story across Kentucky and across our country, but then also feel really good about the efforts we're putting in to plant trees. And so a lot of folks are thinking about reforesting farms as farms are maybe transitioning and folks don't have younger generations to take them on or don't want to be leasing, they just want to take entire fields and reforest them. And there are a lot of different theories of change about how to reforest, whether that's incorporating some silvopasture techniques and still bringing in animals, planting rows of trees or planting orchards to one day harvest from, like chestnuts or hazelnuts, or planting satellite plantings. And so birds will come into a group, of trees and then be dropping seeds. And so slowly these satellite plantings will merge across a field to meet. A lot of folks are thinking about riparian restoration too. And so that's how we plant around our waterways. Which is, a lot of people are thinking about keeping animals out of water too, just for maintaining clean water sources. But there's a lot of different planting schemes for planting around water. Being a young farmer and being able to work on a farm, especially a family farm, really does feel like a dream come true. Neither of us grew up on a farm. But grew up having access to farmland and fields and forests to run in. And so both of us have always shared just how good that feels to us, definitely, more so than sitting in an office, which we've done our fair share of as well. It's also really, really hard work. And I think that's something we didn't even realize looking at the generations above us in our lineage that a lot of them were farmers, just how much that takes and how it's really important to have a good team.
Yeah, so we're excited to work with Mount Folly for a variety of reasons, not just like the group of people that we're getting to meet through all the connections and workshop opportunities. Those connections have a lot of value to us. And the future of farming in Kentucky and across this country is somewhat uncertain, but we are really optimistic that we're ready to take this challenge on and see what comes of it. Mount Folly's given us opportunity to explore a little bit and kind of dive deeper into some of the avenues of kind of a regenerative farming that we're interested in.
Well, as far as our food system, one thing I'm really glad to be getting to know Mount Folly and the work they're doing and helping organize all of us is just getting more trees out on folks' farms and really connecting with farms about what are the ways that trees will work for you. Trees can be used as a tool for any different system, whether that's food production directly through getting fruits and nuts off of the trees, or supporting wildlife that we may be hunting or fishing, or raising beef. Trees are a really important part of that operation. So it's been just a joy to get to connect with other folks and just all share a love of trees.
So Bobby, this is a little different than a typical pasture. Tell us what's going on here. Yeah, so this is a 3-year-old patch of big blue stem and Indian grass. It's kind of it's a warm season native, and it does really well here in the bluegrass region. Kind of hence the name, right? And it puts on a lot of tonnage in the summer when a lot of the other grasses play out. So it's really ideal forage for the cattle. And this creates, on top of a good forage for cattle in the summer slump, a little bit more ecological benefit than some of our traditional, or what we're used to seeing as traditional pastures, right? Yeah, I mean, we got this started through like a quail habitat initiative. And so it does offer really good nesting habitat for the quail, but the deer love to spend time in here and hunker down, not to mention all the other songbirds and just like insects that inhabit this space. Yeah, there's just a chorus around us right now of insects. I'm sure it's probably being picked up, but it's really something special. As far as the tonnage for cattle, but are there any, like, seasonally? Is this helping you on the cattle operation by filling a gap maybe in some full season stuff, or is there potential? Yeah, certainly. So this plot is really for us just to get familiar with growing and establishing this plant, and so we're only in the 5-acre patch right now. The idea is, if this establishes well, which to this point it looks really good for us, how can we expand? It is economical to go to 20% of our grazing space into warm season grass, and really capitalize that on the summer when everyone else is really kind of, the cattle are really slowing down and trying to deal with the heat and stressing with the fescue toxicity. Cattle come over here and just kind of get with it. That's fantastic. That's fantastic. And then soil benefits. I've heard some things about native grasses and root systems and stuff. Is there a difference there as far as what we see and what we would expect in a grassland like this versus, say, a fescue dominated pasture? Yeah. So, I mean, compared to all of our non-native, fescue dominated bluegrass, orchard grass kind of pastures, root depth is going to vary, but, you're talking 3 to 6, 8, maybe a foot of root depth in there. Already that we know that we've got root depth of 6 feet, in just a few years. So as these plants continue to mature over time, it is possible to get, up to 10 feet of root depth, which is, as far as water holding capacity, is just like something we're just not familiar with. We're really hoping to kind of utilize this in a lot of spaces on the farm and kind of even impact spaces outside of just these patches. Yeah. And I know I grew up hearing, and you probably did too, from all the farmers, that it would take at least 100 years to create an inch of topsoil. And now a lot of the research that's coming out is showing that we were wrong, because that was all based on deposition, top-down stuff. And now we're actually creating the soil in the entire rhizosphere. So we got 6 times the amount of space that's influenced by roots that can have a massive impact on climate, potentially, in carbon sequestration. Yeah, I mean, just at the amount of carbon being put deep into the soil, not just on that upper layer that has a tendency to wash out and erode, but way down in there. What made you decide to do this? What's your driving force? Yeah, I think we know we need to expand on our options, because if we just kind of tie ourselves to just a few things that we know well, it just limits us. And so this just and even trying this plot gives me the just the confidence to continue to try other things. So that's part of it. Just it was a good first experiment, and then to realize all the benefits as we have gone on. Yeah, well, I know in Mount Folly, we're super excited about agriculture and conservation. We love to blur that line because have me work in these landscapes that just kind of do all those things. And this is a fantastic example. We're really glad to be out here. Glad to be working with you. Yeah. Oh, no, it's really good for us too. Creates all these opportunities, and just lets us learn. In addition to just improving the forage, really for on an animal health side of things, just good good forage, good nutrition means that we're treating cattle less. Same can be said for incorporating shade and spreading out shade evenly in pastures too. So we're made a big effort, and those who operated the farm before us have made a really significant effort into establishing not just like a tree here and there, but whole groves of trees that can really handle the impact of large numbers of cattle, but then offer them shade when they need it most. We're so heavily fescue dominated here, and that fescue toxicity kind of restricts their blood flow and kind of keeps them hot. And that is one of the biggest things we battle. It's probably one of the biggest financial losses to the whole conventional cattle industry. So in mitigating that with different types of forages, but also with shade and refuge, that's what we're making an effort on. We're special in a way because we have this tree nursery here, and that was established with the thinking of really just supporting the farm itself first, but then if we found a way to expand beyond that. So there are a lot of ways to go about trying to protect these trees and get them to grow well in the beginning and get some height on them, but to get them to survive for the long haul. So you really need your tree density. You need those survival numbers is what you're going for. So we've experimented with just protecting a single tree with a really heavy duty cattle panel. That does seem to work really well. And your trees often survive in that setting. There's some maintenance involved with that. Even simple fence line plantings are a really quick way to get a lot of trees established. So an offset hot wire, you're really only talking about losing 2 to 3 feet at most of your fence line grazing, in return for, you can plant trees every few feet in that setting to really get a silvopasture situation established. Other methods we're going to start working on this year are going to be setting off parallel rows of trees that are protected by runs of high tensile, 1 or 2 strands at a time, and in such a way that cattle can still graze in and through them without it being kind of an unnatural grazing setting. We can still mow in and through them without moving wires or having underground, electric. So that's on the horizon. And in the meantime, it's just all about getting some trees in the ground to start with, and then we'll go from there. We're really fortunate to get to work with Mount Folly to get these trees established, mainly because we're getting to work with other farmers and learning, through their mistakes and through our mistakes. Collectively, we're going to find a way to find the best way, ideally, to get trees protected and to get trees into pastures here, into working pastures in a way where we're not just sacrificing a space for 5 or 10 years and hope that we can weather that loss in acreage